I introduced Rob Kolodner's VIP card with an official 1982 computer chip laminated onto his engine. So I've...
When I came to Washington in 1993, when I crossed to the dark side, I did carry this, and I've been carrying the card, not the laminated one, but the plain one, with me ever since as a card-carrying member of the underground, who then got to be in one of the leadership positions. And the experience of the underground for the first several years, I was really peripheral, right? Because I was out taking care of patients and calling in, making sure I was in touch. But a lot of the action was going on in Washington. I'd talk to Marina Bates and talk to Tom, to Dan, find out what was going on, Dick Davis. But they were really doing the operations, and I was able to fly below the radar, especially because for the first several years we didn't have a computer in Atlanta, so we weren't having to answer all sorts of IG, GAO, congressional kinds of inquiries that were tying up incredible time for the people who were a part of it. But what I was struck by, and certainly has been the lesson that I try and bring to the activities that I'm doing today, are the fact that the real innovations, the real gains, aren't done by the people who are planning the systems. And that when I was in MURMO and in the Office of Information, the idea was to plan out something because we were being held accountable to deliver something in a certain time, and to do the best planning that we could do, which sometimes was real good and sometimes wasn't. Time-wise, it wasn't, but in terms of achievements, it was tremendous. Recognizing that what we really wanted to do was create an environment for the people in the field to come up with something that we hadn't conceived of that then could grow. And a lot of that was to give them the tools. So when we created something, the successful things were the things that weren't locked down. They were the health summaries, which allowed you to kind of put things together. I'd now describe it as a Lego system, because you could use different size blocks, different color blocks. What did you want? How much did you want it? Did you want the last 5 or the last 2 years? What order did you want it? I mean, you didn't try and do it for them. You made it incredibly flexible and let people do things that you never even could imagine would be done. And this understanding, this trust of what people could do, paid off again and again. So when a group of us were told by Dave Van Hooser in 1992 that it's very important, we've decided we're going to have computerized provider order entry, and you've got to write that, or you got to give us the specs for the program. And one of the things that that stayed even through those times where there seemed to be somewhat a top-down control was that there was the recognition that Ted and Marty had done, that you want teams, that it is that you need to have the programmers and the users work together in an iterative fashion to really refine the programs. What happened was the places that were seeded so successfully were actually the worst ones to use the national programs because they were addicted. Right? And when you, in Salt Lake City, when you had a programmer and a psychologist or psychiatrist where the user would say, I need this, and 24 hours later, 48 hours later, they'd have it. Being part of a system that says we have a 3-year cycle, it doesn't work. There just is no way. And especially when it kind of fit like a glove. That was the first change, I think, was where we put these requirements groups across sites to define the variability that was needed, the switches, the flexibility, so that unlike the vendor systems which needed tailoring for each site. Basically, you just needed to put the configurations in a site, and you run it in this hospital, large hospital, small hospital, outpatient, inpatient, long-term care. It was just a configuration change. It wasn't something that was a huge deal. And so there was that flexibility, that tool in that sense that we were providing even from the very beginning architectures that Tom and George and others did. I think that CPOE, going back to that, Jim Laub was the co-chair. This was this clinical record SIAG, this interdisciplinary group, because we had to make sure we not only met physician needs, but nursing needs and pharmacy and psychology. It had to make sure that it met the administration needs in terms of things. Dave Van Hooser was there. Need to do this in Salt Lake. Now, we assumed that even if we did it the best, we're going to get maybe 80, 90% of the doctors using it. And doctors being the hardest group, so you figure that's your high bar. So we said, okay, we're starting with 90%. We need to, this was 1992, there were PCs out, there wasn't Windows, but you had some applications that had to run on a PC rather than the dumb terminal. We said, well, we need to run it on a PC. They said, no, can't do that. Requirements can't have it. I said, okay, so we're at 90% now, that's down to 60%. Now we need to do pre-admission orders. No, can't do that. Okay, we're down to 50. By the time we finished, we provided the specs and we said 7% of doctors will use it. 7. 0, 7. A few geeks will do it, but that's about it. We put it out there. And for the most part, that worked, except there was this positive deviant. That's the latest term. We didn't know that term back then. This outlier. And they were using it. In fact, they took this pretty kludgy set of software and were using it in their entire inpatient setting. Washington, D.C. They took it and they realized they needed to tailor it, because remember there was this little tailoring, and get the right menus and work with each of the disciplines and each of the wards to say, what were those quick orders? It's kind of a throwaway there, right? What were these quick orders that would make your workflow easier? And step by step by step, they built it. And they taught us that it wasn't just leadership, but there was this tailoring and working with the end users, again, to make the system fit. Now, we didn't give them very good tools. It took a lot of effort to do that. But they helped to teach us that you could take a not very good piece of software and with the right support and the right leadership actually make it happen. And that was amazing, because then we were able to begin to replicate that across. We didn't give up on the, let me go back to one of the things. I'm surprised that I ended up with Dave Van Hooser offering to talk with me, because about 2 years before that, Jim Laub and I came up with this idea that you really need to have the requirements not reporting to the IT, because they were really kind of under the thumb of the IT, and it was like, well, we'll pay attention when we want to, but it really needed to report to the chief medical director, and then have the user leaders put the requirements down. So he and I came to Washington to meet with Jim Holsinger, and we had this idea. We were going to make a pitch to Jim that we set this group up. What we didn't understand, being out in the field and a little naive and not having served in the military, is that Holsinger believed there were informational briefings and there were decisional briefings. We were coming in for a decisional briefing. He was expecting an informational briefing. And he happened to have Dave Van Hooser sitting in the room with him. After the meeting, when Dave was talking with Jim and I and saying how, he was ready to slice us and dice us because, this end run was not very effective. The idea was good, but it wasn't going to happen.
What year is this?
This was about I'd have to go back, but it's probably around 1990, 1991. And we can look to when Jim came in as the chief medical director. May have been 92, but it was a failed coup. And despite that, Dave Van Hooser had talked about coming up and providing support. So there were some things along the way that all of us try something and they don't quite work, whether they're the right thing or not. They don't work. And this creativity, the innovation, supporting it, providing tools, learning from groups, individuals where there was leadership, learning that you couldn't demand something immediately and go from zero and set it and say in 2 years we're going to do this, but in fact go to a milestone, that magic 40-50% usage again and again and again, that at that point leadership could say it works, we've worked the bugs out. It may have taken a short time, may have taken a long time, but once you get it, then leadership can add to it. And at least one time when top leadership saw something that really was the right thing, saves lives, and said, we're going to do it in 2 years. I want it across the country. We got it there in 2 years, unfortunately, because it took us another 3 years to work out all the problems that had been created by people forcing it in and getting it done. And so this idea that we're part of a system, that the system goes at a certain rate and sometimes you can control it. You can be a very good project manager, but because this involved people and not just things, you never knew how long it would take, whether it would go quickly or whether it would go very slowly. Mailman went quickly. Forum went quickly. People went to it, and it grew. And ahead of time, even the creator of it thought it would fall apart. So none of us, as successful as you might be, none of us are very good at anticipating and predicting, although that doesn't stop us from doing it. And so drawing from those experiences then, and trying to figure out how to leverage the success that we had in VA and apply it to the nation, gets to be kind of tricky. And it isn't that you can kind of make the projection, but it's what are those lessons, what are those principles? I was in Australia at MedInfo last year. And we were asking around what are the other countries that have done it better? Because right now in the US, it's, for 2007, 14% of docs in outpatient clinic have computers that have a minimum function. That minimum function doesn't even include decision support, but it's just documenting and ordering labs, retrieving labs, ordering meds. And those 4 functions, as I say, are only about 14% for the rest of the country. When we were asking what countries are doing it better, we heard Netherlands, we heard Denmark, we heard New Zealand. When we talked to the people, the doctors in Denmark, they said, yeah, we've got our doctors kind of using things for outpatient. For inpatient, we've been missing the mark, and we keep setting a 5-year target, and then we keep having to revise it, and then we keep having to revise it. And they even plotted their uptake on the standard sigmoid curve and began to put their real data against it, which, while the politicians were saying we need it in 2002, their curve was taking it out to about 2010, and so they were told never to collect the data again. So they were having some trouble. New Zealand talked about it and were planning, and they were making some progress, but they really didn't have a lot of usage. Netherlands seemed to have something and may be the most far along as far as that goes. I realized that the VA had 100% usage, or 90, 95% usage. and that the VA took care of more people than the entire population of Denmark or the entire population of New Zealand. So, we can do something country-sized, just not 300 million. That was extraordinary. So having had this opportunity to take the inspiration of seeing the change in VA and knowing that that capability, when put in the hands of good people, both patients in managing their own health care, and Ross has some wonderful stories about the patients and how they manage their health when given the opportunity, or the providers who want to give good care but don't always have the means to help them to achieve that. And given the offer to now how do we help the country, it was an interesting shift to go from concentrating on solution, which is what VISTA is, to creating the environment. And that's something that I just feel fortunate to be able to contribute to. Like the experience in VA, it doesn't come without criticism. But if we do it right, if we move it along, then I think it can be extremely helpful. And so what we're looking at is how do we, Tom was talking about the Tim Berners-Lee and creating certain parts, certain capabilities. Actually, in that sense, the browser and the World Wide Web are a solution that ran on an infrastructure that had to be there. And right now, we're just at the point of creating that infrastructure, hoping and knowing that if we do it right, there will be entities, companies, individuals who will come up with something. And what we want to do is create the environment so that something good actually can spread and can't be stopped because people can just take it and use it. And that, for example, we don't know whether the architecture for connecting is a geographic health information exchange, sometimes called a RIO, Regional Health Information Organization, or whether it's an integrated delivery network that may be dominant in an area that helps to connect, or whether it's what's in Iowa, which is a group of providers who are separate entities who decide to buy a single solution that allows them to connect, that covers about 70%, two products cover 70% of the state, or whether it's this idea of a personal health bank, personally controlled data set that then the individual gives access to.
I know the answer to that.
Actually, you don't. But you do have an opinion. And my job is to give the environment where your opinion can compete with all those others.
My job is to straighten you out, Rob.
Well, and what the problem for you to solve then is, because it isn't a matter of whether the individual gets to say or control what their information is, but that particular architecture, how do you meet the population needs with that architecture, as opposed to some of the others that meets both the individual, the healthcare needs, the individual empowerment needs, and the population needs, which include standard public health, include advancement of medical knowledge, so being able to research and see the patterns. It includes measuring quality and reporting quality so that you can know that that doctor is a better quality than that doctor, or at least a different value. You can decide what it is. And those are things that are also part of what the information needs to serve. So the information needs to be standardized to meet all those needs, and the architecture needs to support it. And the trade-offs in terms of how tight the privacy or how tight the security is are trade-offs. Valet car? Not here? Because we don't know, we need to create something that in fact can be flexible enough to meet those needs and where individuals and the society can decide. And the one piece that hasn't allowed us to solve things, something that a number of us worked on one time before and now it's going around again, is how do we address the lack of trust among the different healthcare sectors so that you can't get providers, payers, insurers, consumers to sit around a table and work together because they're always afraid that one of them is getting an advantage. And we've got now, as part of this effort, a grant for an organization to bring about such an entity and to have bylaws and to have governance that will allow all the different stakeholders to participate but none to control, to improve the health and care and well-being of individuals and population. And those same principles that allowed us to succeed in the underground, I think can serve as the basis for how we go about bringing this type of an entity together that we can all be a part of, and that can make sure that our children and our children's children can have the health, can have the capability, can have the good life that they need, and to move from what our healthcare system is right now, actually healthcare sector, because it's not good enough to be a system, from an interventional system at the end to a prevention system, because the reminders are there and we can do what all of the providers want to do but can't remember to do, to building on the genomics, be able to predict and intervene. And in that way, not only decrease the cost of the system, which is secondary, but most importantly, have it be person-focused, have it be person-centered, and have it be about health and not about how do I maximize the income because of having to support a chronic illness in an interventional model. So I thank all of you, some who are now new part, some who were working and setting up the opportunity that I was able to join along the way, because it's been a fun ride and it's not over yet. And I look forward to moving into this next stage. Tom talked about me hiring him, or trying to draw. I'm not sure whether you hire you or just kind of let you loose, but
you dragged me.
I dragged you.
Me.
But between Dan, who was certainly at the time that I was here, always at that edge, and coming in, I think it was September of 1994, saying the White House is going to have a website up. We've got to have a VA website so that we can be up on there. Even though when I went to show my mother at 9600 baud, the time it would take to load, she's looking at this and saying, what is this thing? Tom was the person who introduced us to Guardian Angel, the concept that took us 11 years to get the inkling, where we were really feeding data, live data into a personal health record. So I thought Tom was only 5 years ahead. At least for us to be able to achieve it, it's more like 10 years. And on some of the things he's talking about, who knows? But the positive health, the language of positive health.
Positive genomics.
Positive genomics, an epidemic of health.
Say it again.
I suspect we're going to be hearing that. I can't tell you whether that's going to be in 2018, 2020, or whether it's like Mailman, by 2012, we're going to have it. But I suspect that we'll come back on another reunion and see where we're at on that.
This restaurant, I'm pretty happy with it.
You're happy, okay. Good. Thank you, and look forward to continuing to work with you and advance all of this.